Undercity Commander, your source for EDH.
You heard right. This is Undercity Commander. I'm Jacob.
I'm Hunter.
I'm still Steven.
Oh. Well, we're here to talk about Magic, the Gathering, and EDH, which is also known as Commander. All aspects, all of it, but mainly focusing
Commander
on deck building. Hunter, why do you tell us about this topic of this episode number 2?
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about our deck building processes. Everyone builds decks a different way, and if you've never built a Commander deck before, you're probably going to be a little lost on where to start because it's so drastically different from normal 60-card Commander. Fear not, because we're going to help you, and by the end of this, you should be able to build your own Commander deck.
Or be drowned in information.
Yes. So, I guess I'll start. And the very first thing today, like now, that I do whenever I want to build a new deck is I'll look up the Commander on this website called edhrec.com. It's a really great resource. It compiles, I think it goes through Tapped Out. I'm not 100% sure, but it kind of keeps track of every Commander deck that's listed on a certain website, and it shows the most used cards and cards that synergize the best with every Commander. So if you go there, you'll find a lot of cards you've never known existed that will fit very well with your Commander. So the first thing I do these days is I go to EDHREC and I look at all the cards that they mention, and I see which of those cards I have in my collection, and I'll go pull them to put aside for the possibility pile. What I used to do, I used to look up deck lists. Like if I wanted to build a deck for Kaalia of the Vast, I'd go Kaalia of the Vast deck and look up deck list. And I don't do that anymore because the problem I found was that all the deck lists I found were super competitive. And they were filled with super expensive cards. And I felt like the only way to build a deck that I wanted to build was to build it with these stupid competitive cards, with these super expensive cards. And it kind of took the fun out of deck building. It kind of made it monotonous and like, oh, I got to order this expensive card if I want to do any good. And that's really not in the spirit of EDH.
Did looking up the decks online and seeing all the expensive cards just make it feel like different flavors of like good stuff decks? Like you could only put the best of the best cards in there, but the general gave it like just a little bit different flavor, but they were all pretty much the same deck?
Yeah, more or less. Most of them were just, they'd have these, they all had Scroll Rack, they all had, all the expensive staple cards. Like every green deck you look up a deck list on when it says competitive in front of it has Sylvan Library in it. Every one. And there's just certain cards that are almost auto-includes for competitive decks. And when I didn't have those, I got really discouraged and felt like I couldn't build with that Commander anymore because I don't have this. And it's just not true. And what I like about EDHREC is it gives me a huge amount of options to choose charts from. And it really gives me, it gives me access to cards I didn't know existed. That I can, and a lot of those cards end up being budget cards, like a card under $1 that I didn't know existed that synergizes very well with the Commander that I want to build. So it gives me a vast array of options and a vast array of build styles for each Commander, and I really like that about EDHREC.
Pretty cool.
Do either of y'all use internet sources when building a deck at all?
Sometimes.
Yes, but
For me,
I probably start with looking through my own collection and just using cards that work before going online to like magiccards.info or whatever and just looking at all cards of a certain color.
Yeah. My second step after I go to EDHREC and kind of see what I have and pull what I have is I'll usually go to my collection and just look all the way through it and pull all the cards that either work with the colors I'm working with or work with the Commander that I'm working with. And then after that, I have a pile of about 300 or 400 cards. But one other thing I wanted to mention about EDHREC is it gives an average in a little pie chart for each Commander. So for instance, with Kaalia, it'll say that, the average deck has 25 creatures, 5 sorceries, 10 instants, X lands, X enchantments, X artifacts. And it really gives me a starting point. Like, for instance, how many creatures do I want to run? Do I want it to be a majority creature deck? Do I want it to be a majority spells deck? Sometimes when I want it to be in between, like when it's not obvious, this needs a whole ton of creatures or this needs a whole ton of spells, I really like looking at that pie chart just to kind of get a starting idea of how many of each different card type I want to run. And then when I get into actually putting the deck together, I find out how I want it to be, like when I'm looking at the cards that I want to use. So it just gives me a good starting point to decide what kind of deck I want to build.
So for standard 60 card decks, you see like people usually suggest 20 to 24 lands or something, and then, you know, a balance between 20 creatures and 20 spells, or give or take a few. How does that translate to EDH? What are the general numbers people would suggest starting out with?
I would, for any deck I was going to start building, I automatically slot out 38 cards of the 99 for lands. Depending on what style of deck or what commander you're going to build, you either go up or down from there. But a general good rule of thumb is 38 for me. Steven, do you have a different number?
No, mine's pretty much the same. I'll go up if it's something like a ramp, or if it's land-centric, like a landfall deck, something silly like that.
Yeah.
And I'll only go down if the majority of the cards have a mana cost of like 1 or 2. But anything that's like mid-mana cost, 4s and above, is most of your deck, then I wouldn't go below 38 personally.
Yeah, agreed.
To build off of the whole deck building thing, my process is pretty much the same as Hunter's, just backwards. I really enjoy going through my collection, so I'll usually sit down and do that first, see what I want to put in there, what I think would be fun, and then I'll look on websites. If once I've done that, if I feel like I don't have enough synergy, or if I feel like I don't have enough fun stuff in the deck, I'll go online and I'll usually see something that I've overlooked, like, oh, that's an interesting interaction that I didn't know, and at that point I'll hunt down the cards that they suggest, either one I overlooked in my set, or if I have to buy it or trade for it, because I hate buying. But yeah, pretty much my process on that.
I want to add in, ever since I started not looking up just deck lists and going off of that, I've gone from building maybe 4 decks every month or two to like I've spit out like 5 or 6 decks in the past few weeks, you know, because it makes me use my collection more. It makes me feel like, my collection is valid, which it is, and I feel like looking at too many deck lists online will make you feel like the cards you have aren't valid, and that's just not true for Commander. It's not, maybe for a competitive 60 card, but it's not true at all for Commander.
But what if my collection is wimpy and I don't have a lot of cards? What would you suggest me do to fill out my collection?
I would recommend buying a Commander PreCon, because it gets you right in the game. It can get you some really cool cards, and you can build off of the PreCon from there as your collection
true. They're
grows.
a great place to start.
That's where I started EDH.
That's what we all did.
I got the red, white, blue Zedru deck. That was a fun little political introduction to EDH. A lot of cool interactions with multiplayer games that happened.
Once you have your PreCon, and once you play it a few times, and you figure out what you like that the deck does and what you don't like, going online and looking at EDH Rec or at go to magiccards.info and just scouring through for a certain keyword or something, you can really find a lot of cards that you didn't know about, because if you're new, you're not going to know about as many cards. Another good way to get deck building strategies and editing tips is to go to your Magic the Gathering mentor, whoever got you into playing Magic, or whoever you kind of aspire to play like, or play, whoever drives you to play better. Go ask them. One of the things that made my deck building better, Steven, actually was you, because you kind of inadvertently got me into the game. Me and Jacob kind of got each other into it at the same time, but I watched you play first, and I remember you talking about it at school. And then when I'd ever come play with you, I always felt like, oh, well, Steven's this really good player. I want to play as good as he does. So
can I interject right here and just apologize for tricking you like that?
No. No, because you still made me better.
That's very cruel of me to make you think that I was good at the game.
I think you're great at the game, man. You really made me. You honestly really did. Like, just playing with you made me play the way that I do today, and play is just, it helped teach me how to build a deck, because you also have to build to, with Commander, your meta is going to be different than a competitive 60 card format, and your meta is going to be your friends, and you'll learn how you want to build certain decks, and certain cards you're going to have to include when you play with your play group. So I would say my Magic mentor, Steven, helped me a lot without me asking. And then I always go to Steven, well, what do you think? You know, what card, do you know of any cards that work with this commander? Or whenever I build a new deck, Steven would go, oh, why don't you run this card? And I'm like, oh, I've never heard of that card. So there are endless resources for discovering new cards that'll work in your EDH deck, regardless of if you built it yourself or if you bought it PreCon and you're a beginner and you don't know about as many cards.
And if you hate your mentor, you can look up online different interactions and combos to build your deck around that are specifically built to defeat the mentors.
Yes, you can.
So that's what influenced Death Cloud?
No.
Great.
That leads into the next thing I wanted to talk about, actually, is the change in my deck building philosophy. So my old deck building philosophy used to be win and make sure my opponent can't do anything so that I can win. And that is not
really?
the spirit of
Is that
EDH.
so?
Do what, Steven?
Is that so? I had no idea.
Yeah. And I changed that philosophy after people started using that philosophy against me, because they had to play against me. And I was like, this is not fun at all. Wow, I'm going to stop running these types of cards. And then I realized I created this monster.
EDH is all about the fun social aspects, and doing anything to take away from that is going to take away from the whole of the game.
Yeah, like there's a time and place for the really hateful cards, and there's a time and place for super competitive play. You just have to know your play group, and if there's a problem with super competitive play, talk to your play group, because especially if you're a new player and you're playing with people that have been playing for a while, they should be more than happy to kind of dumb down their decks, or at least play them dumbed down, so that you can have fun and enjoy Commander and learn.
Never get stuck in a
Correct.
situation where you just hate playing with the people in your play group.
Yeah, it's easy to get salty in Commander because it's so political, but there's no reason to let it continue. You're all adults. You can have a conversation about it. And now, instead of including hateful cards, I make myself include at least one political card, be it a Will of the Council card where people have to vote on certain things, or a card that helps everyone at least once, or a card, anything super political. I try to make myself run at least one now, so that at least with that one card, everyone can kind of have fun and enjoy,
So as a personal opinion, do you guys find that that's just the natural progression of like a play group? That somebody comes in, maybe they're new, and eventually they'll build their deck around beating the other people, but then when they do that enough, the other people build their deck around beating the first person, and it just goes back and forth until everybody realizes this isn't fun, and they just sort of equalize.
It's very possible, and it's dangerous to get into that loop. You want to really maximize your play group and really get into your local community to avoid situations like that. And you want to build your decks in a more general way and not build them to hate on other people's specific deck builds.
Yeah, I would definitely say that that's the natural progression, but I think the number one way to fight that is deck diversity. Whenever, like for instance, I had this I still have a Sheldred deck that I played with all the time, and eventually everyone built decks to defeat that Sheldred deck, and that can be avoided with people building new decks regularly. You don't have to build top tier decks regularly. Just if everyone builds a new deck every now and then, that can cut that out, because that's all building around other people is going to come from playing the same deck all the time, and if everyone's playing the same deck all the time. So I'd say the number one way to fight that is to diversify the setting. It can be the same people, but diversify the games by not playing the same commander deck all the time. And that doesn't mean go spend a bunch of money to build a new deck all the time. There's plenty of budget builds that can still stay competitive in Commander, because that's one of the beautiful things about Commander is you don't have to spend $1,000 on a deck to have fun. Just try your best to diversify the play experience, and it's not criminal if you only have 2 or 3 decks. Just don't play the same one over and over and over to the point where everyone has to try to specialize their deck to defeat that criminal. One deck, because that is going to
completely against the law. It is criminal. Completely against the law. They will come for you, they will find you, and they will take your magic card.
The Council of Commander.
Yes, the Council of Commander is going to take them. But just stay diverse when you're in your deck building, and you really should be good there.
I'd say ask to try out other people's decks if they're comfortable with that. You want to play through as many different kinds of decks as you can, and that would help just change it up.
Yeah, that's actually a good thing too. I always actually really like whenever we, like Steven, sometimes me and you'd play one of mine and I'd play one of yours, and then sometimes with when me and Jacob and another friend of ours would play, we'd play each other's decks sometimes, and that can also fix a stale environment.
Playing with each other's decks.
Yeah, just play with each other's decks, and no one is gonna be mad at each other.
Everyone will be happy and have
Hunter,
a fun
did you bring that
time.
big black deck with you? I want to play with that.
That's his favorite one. You
Yep.
know, Sheldred.
It's mine too.
Yep.
None of that was perverted, and if you think it is, that's in your own head. We were just talking about deck builds.
All right,
So,
we're on to
does anyone
spoilers,
have
guys?
anything to add to deck building philosophy? Steven, do you have a certain maybe code you stick to when you build a deck?
Java. C++.
Java, you build decks on Java?
Yeah.
Object-oriented. Sorry. Anyways.
I usually try to stay away from land destruction. I find that it makes more people salty than it does me happy.
Definitely.
No, I try to stay on theme for things. I'll try to be silly with the decks mostly. Try to be silly more than I will. Like, try hard. Like if, I know we've talked about it. I love tribal. And if there's a tribal card that's just objectively worse than another card for its mana cost, I'll still use it. We've got a Kimba deck with, like, all cats. And there's some of those cats out there that just aren't that good comparatively, but they're still going in that deck because they're cats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to be, too. It keeps play light. It keeps the whole environment light for the whole play group, which prevents the angsty, spiteful deck edits that go to each other's throats. I like that.
I have something to add about land bases. Something that I usually do, especially with multicolor decks, is very specific math that might be appealing to some people. And it's not always, it doesn't come out perfect, and you still have to do some modification depending on the deck type. But if you take let's say 38 is your average land inclusion in a deck, and then you're going to divide that for each of the mana symbols in those color cards in your deck. So you add up the total mana symbols in your cards, and this sounds insane, and it's definitely difficult with 100 singleton cards, but you're going to then divide the number of, like, let's say you have a blue-black, you're going to divide the number of blue mana symbols into the total mana symbol count, and then you take that percentage and use that to figure out how many islands you're going to want in that 38 card count land base.
Yes, I do that with like mana apps. There are phone apps now that do mana calculator apps.
So for me, it's pretty much the same. I'll usually, unless there's an obvious difference in one mana symbol from the others, like unless I have a blue-red deck with one red card in it, I'll usually make everything even across the board, and whatever left I have, so say it's a 3-color deck, 38 lands, So 36 of those will be 12 each. So 3 colors, so I've got 12 each. And then I have 2 left over, and I'll say, what are the 2 colors I have more of? Or is one of those colors drastically larger than the others? And that's where those other 2 lands will go into.
That's interesting. I want to try that. I've never tried that. I've had actually trouble coming up with mana bases for 3-color decks recently because it's been so long since I've done that. I actually usually build with 2 colors. Well, I went to do a mana base for a 3-color the other day, and I did it kind of haphazardly, and then did like solitaired it a few times. I was not having a good time with mana every time I did that. So
We're having a bad time.
yeah, I had a real bad time, especially when you have a lot of like budget double lands, or even the rare ones that are budget, like a lot of them laying around. I tend to want to include almost nothing but non-basics, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I need basics, and then I don't know. It's just the mana calculator apps help. There are videos for help, and I also like the way Steven just mentioned, and the way Jacob just mentioned. I like both of those. I'm gonna try those.
And if you're starting out, definitely stick with monocolor or at most 2-color decks, because anything more than that, like Hunter was saying, is pretty difficult.
Yeah, until you get the hang of it. And if you buy a PreCon, like now the latest PreCon is 4-color. That'll be easier to edit since it's already put together. So like if you take out 10 red cards and add 2 blue cards, 3 green cards, and then the rest black cards, that'll be easier to edit your mana base, because you can be like, okay, well, I should probably, I just took out a bunch of red cards. I'm going to take out a few of the red mana generating lands and add, accordingly as you see fit. And also playtesting is your best friend. To go into the conclusion of our deck building process, playtesting, you're almost never stop building a deck, really, because the more you play it, the more you're going to find, I'd like an answer to this scenario. I want to be able to do this more. The more time goes by, the better your deck's going to get, and the more you play it, the better your deck's going to get, because you're going to constantly find things you want to change.
And that is kind of like sideboarding in the standard deck builds, but with EDH, you kind of just include all of the scenarios in your deck, and that's kind of a good way to diversify your deck so that it doesn't get stale in the regular rotation that you're playing.
And don't be afraid to ask somebody if you need help, especially with lands, because lands are one of the last thing people really get down whenever they start playing. Don't be afraid to ask somebody who's been playing longer, or look up online for stuff like that. It's not an easy thing to get down, especially when you're brand new to it.
Definitely.
Heck, you can even ask us by emailing
Don't
us
ask us.
at undercitycommander@gmail.com.
That's right.
Send us pictures of your cats.
Yes.
Speaking of cats, there's some cats in this new set.
There are. We can talk about spoilers now. Current news. Jacob, would you like to start us out with a spoiler you would like to talk about?
Sure. I've got a lot to talk about, and I think we all do. This could go on for a while, but we're going to start just by talking about a new rule. So there was a decision on a split card rule, a specific rule, that wasn't very well addressed. It was recently mentioned that they had kind of danced around the idea of split card converted mana costs, and there was a lot of combos with certain cards that would take advantage of the combined converted mana cost of both sides of a split card. Speaking of, if you didn't know what split cards were, it's one card and each side is a completely separate card and has completely separate converted mana costs. The new ruling is if that card is on the stack and you're casting it as one of the sides, then during its play on the stack, it is considered the converted mana cost of that side that you're casting. However, if it is in your hand or not being casted on the stack, it is the combined converted mana cost of both sides of the card. So that really cuts down on some of the questions that were being brought up on converted mana costs for split cards. What do you guys think about that? And do you have any specific examples?
So on the topic of the new rule change, I'm fine with it personally. I never really used split cards all that much in the things that I would do. A few times I would use the ones from Ravnica, but never really found myself using the ones from the old like time sets. Um, it just never really affected me. I know that a lot of people are probably going to be salty about it because there are much better players out there than me that know how to use these cards to full effect. But for someone who's just goofy and likes to have fun, like me, nah, it doesn't really affect me.
Plus, they're pretty rare. You don't see them too often, but I think the reason that rule was brought up was because we're seeing kind of a new version of split cards in this new set. They used to just be side by side. The card was horizontal, and you could look at them both by turning a card. But the Amon Ket split cards actually have the top half of the card vertical, and the bottom half is a horizontal second card.
Yeah, it's a whole new mechanic. It's really cool. One has to be cast out of your graveyard. As far as my thoughts on the rule change, I, like Steven, have never really run into that problem. Like, I'm sure I've questioned it once or twice when I used Turn and Burn. That's from the Ravnica set, the new Ravnica set. Turn turns a creature into a 0/2, and Burn does 2 damage to a creature. And I would cast that entwined, but I never really had the problem. I can't remember ever wondering, oh, what's its converted mana cost right now? So having a clearly defined rule is cool to me. I like that. But again, I'm not, I'm not playing competitively right now. And if I was, I don't know of any double-sided cards where this would really make me angry or anything. So
split cards. Double-sided would be like the werewolves.
Oh yeah, split. I'm sorry, split cards. But yeah, I'm not affected by it too much. I like having a definite answer on a rule though, if it does ever come out, since there's so many of these coming out now. Several of which I want to use.
Yep. So that was something I didn't know, and I thought it was interesting. And Hunter, you mentioned this is actually a new mechanic where, because they're turned different ways, one of the sides is casted from the graveyard.
Yeah. The one that's horizontal. I'm sorry. The vertical part of the card.
The top half, yes.
Yeah, the top half you play from your hand, and then the second half that is horizontal, you can only play from your graveyard. It has called Aftermath.
Aftermath.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new keywords in this set. Moving on. Anyone want to go next on spoilers?
Yeah, Steven, you go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, because I'm a dork who likes tribal, my spoiler guy is going to be Neheb the Worthy, and he's a 3-cost Minotaur warrior, 1 colorless, a black and a red for a 2/2 with first strike. He gives your other Minotaurs first strike, which I'm all about tribal. I love that. I was sad that we didn't see Minotaur Legend in the Theros set because it had a lot of like neat Minotaurs in it. Going backwards, there's a lot that splash either white or blue, so you won't be able to include those in a deck with this guy at the helm, just black and red, but that still leaves a ton, especially like the good Minotaur Lords and everything. He says as long as you have 1 or fewer cards in your hand, Minotaurs you control get +2/+0, and whenever Neheb the Worthy deals combat damage to a player, each player discards a card, which opens the door for a really interesting discard mechanic. You can discard yourself. There was a lot of stuff in the very first Rakdos set. I say Rakdos set, a Ravnica set, but the Rakdos like tribe that dealt with like everybody discarding, you discard yourself, and there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do with that. Especially since the cycling is back in, you'll be pitching a lot of stuff from your hand. It'll probably be easy to get like low mana cost things in this deck, and either throw them out on the field or pitch them from your hand to leave yourself with 1 or 0 cards, and just sort of give all of your tribal Minotaurs a nice bump.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a cool commander. All the Hellbent abilities and cards. I think he's going to be really cool.
That's right.
Yeah. I guess I'll go ahead with my spoiler. I'm most excited for Hapatra, Vizier of Poisons. She is a black and a green. I love commanders with have very low converted mana cost. She's a legendary human cleric. She's a 2/2. and she reads, whenever Hippotra, Vizier of Poisons, deals combat damage to a player, you may put a neg1 counter on target creature. Whenever you put a neg1 counter on target creature, put a 1/1 green snake creature token with Death Touch. I really like this. I love token strategies. Black and green are my two favorite colors. And there's so many ways to put neg1 counters on creatures. I think she's going to be a super fun build. And I've already started brewing with her. I'm endlessly excited about this commander. Anyone?
Endless.
Anyone have anything to add?
This would be a deck that would definitely benefit from things like Parallel Lives, Doubling Season, which I know are kind of like good stuff cards, but they definitely work with that mechanic. If you've got those in there, throw a Frasca. Throw a Frasca in there. That's in the colors. Make yourself a little tokeny thing.
Super cool. Yeah, she makes those tokens the 1/1s people lose the game. Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to build with her.
Does Proliferate work on that? On neg1
Yep.
That'd be sick.
Snakes everywhere. Death Touch snakes everywhere.
Ugh.
Okay.
Just kill all your creatures.
Yes. I'm thinking about pre-ordering a foil of her. I'm really excited.
Ooh.
Nice. I'm thinking about pre-ordering. I saw Deck Builder's kit online for Amon Cat, and I was thinking about getting that because I really like the lands in this set.
Does it come with the full art lands?
Some really cool lands.
I would hope it came with a few. You have a
might
good
want to make
chance.
sure.
Yeah, I would make sure, but so we're gonna go over cats because we're talking about tribal. We got minotaurs, we got snakes, and we got cats. One of Egypt's most famous deities, the cat. So there's a card called the Regal Caracol, and it is a white 3/3 cat for 3 and 2 white. Other cats you control get +1/+1 and have lifelink. Also, when this card enters the battlefield, you get 2 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink. So this is a good white weenie card to have in any mono white overflow the battlefield deck. But it was mentioned because I think all of us here like cats. I think all of us here have cats, and I think everyone knows that cats are adorable. If you have cats at home, send us an email at undercitycommander@gmail.com. Tell us how many. Tell us what they get up to. Tell us how many things they've wrecked and how adorable they were when they did it.
Yes. If you send us pictures of your cat, we will pick a feature cat of the week every week for our social media pages.
And maybe we'll even draw them into a card.
Yes. So send us pics.
Custom tokens.
So maybe.
Let's see. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm really liking Regal Caracol because it makes a bunch of kitty cats, and it's totally going in Brago, who I'm doing a deck tech for soon. So
stay tuned for that.
Stephen, what's the next spoiler you would like to talk about?
The next spoiler I would like to talk about is Lord of the Accursed. Again, because I'm a tribal dork, I love that we've got another zombie lord who works with zombie cards, harkens back to Diregraph Captain, Death Baron, stuff like that. He is 2 colorless and a black. He's just a zombie for a 2/3. Other zombies you control get +1/+1. You can pay 1 colorless and a black and tap him, and all zombies gain menace until end of turn, which means they can't be blocked except by 2 or more, I believe. Is that right? Is that menace?
That's it.
Cool.
Yeah, he's cool.
But yeah, I like that he pumps them. He makes the zombies harder to block. I like that he can tap for 2. He's definitely going in probably something like Grim.
Oh,
really
yeah.
like his flavor.
Definitely. Yeah. Always good to have a good tribal pump card. A lord, as they're called.
And the term lord harkens back to like the older cards, when cards like this would just say lord, and wouldn't specify. Like for this one, it would be creature lord, and it would just say zombies you control get +1/+1. And they changed that as it got more modernized, so that it has a creature type other than lord, but still that ability of giving a certain tribe or a certain set of cards +1/+1 has always sort of retained the nickname of Lord.
Yeah, cool stuff.
Yeah.
The next spoiler I'd like to talk about works with Hapatra, and it is called Nest of Scarabs. It is a 2/1 black enchantment. Whenever you put one or more neg1 counters on a creature, create that many 1/1 black insect creature tokens. So, in a weird way, it almost doubles your tokens with Hapatra, but it's different tokens. It doesn't double the snakes. You just put 2 tokens in instead of 1. And I'm really excited to use it. I think it's a really cool card. Again, I love making tokens, and this makes tokens.
Now you got snakes and bugs.
Yep. All
Hear
kinds
that,
of
Joe
poisonous
Rogan?
critters
Snakes
for the
and bugs.
vizier of poisons.
The Vizier of Poisons.
Yes, the vizier.
The Vizier.
Vizier. I heard someone call it Visor one time.
Really?
Ah.
Oh my god. Really?
Ugh, what a noob. Jacob,
you
what's
ever
your
watched
last spoiler
Aladdin?
for this episode?
I don't know. You tell me.
Nissa.
Ah, I got you to say it. Then I didn't have to. But I still have to say it. So, it's Nissa, because she is a cool planeswalker. And I'm really enjoying all the planeswalkers in this set. We're going to talk a little bit more about those probably on the next episode. But this one in particular, Nissa, Steward of Elements, is an X cost, which is super interesting for a planeswalker. It's X
First one.
and green blue. So another interesting thing is Nissa's always been green. I think she was green white. She hasn't been green blue yet. So
She's only been mono.
Has she been green white?
oh, okay.
No.
I was thinking of the other planeswalker. So she enters with X loyalty counters, so potentially could enter with a whole crap ton.
Yes, for EDH, she's going to be epic.
She has a +2 Scry 2 ability, good for card advantage. She has a 0 cost ability, which we're actually seeing on, is it all the planeswalkers of the set, or is it just her and Gideon?
I think only her and Gideon have zeros.
Okay, that's a really interesting thing, though, because you don't see that a lot. So her 0 cost is, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card or a creature card with a converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of loyalty counters on Nissa, then you may put that card onto the battlefield. So that's kind of insane, especially if you mana ramp into her and give her like at the least 5 or 6 loyalty counters. That's going to be bringing out some big creatures, and you can also get land from it. So definitely a good planeswalker for mana ramp, big creature deck, similar to what I build all the time. Only difference is the green blue costs. You're not gonna be able to put her in a mono green, which is what I would want to do, but there's some pretty big blue creatures out there, krakens and whatnot. She has a neg 6 cost to untap 2 target lands, similar to Garruk. They become 5/5 elemental creatures with flying and haste until end of turn, and they're still lands. So you get some big damage overhead if you can bring her in with 6 in 1 turn even. So that could be a potentially devastating blow, like 10 damage in the air in 1 turn that your opponents weren't expecting. So any thoughts on Nissa?
I think she's super cool. I think her final ability is a little lackluster for final abilities, but it's really cool. I really love her 0 and her plus even. And I love that she comes in with X loyalty counters. And in the right deck, her final ability could be amazing. But
yeah, that 0 cost could balance out the lacklusterness of that final element.
I kind of get the feeling that that's what they did. Just like they toned down the last one because you're able to bring her in with however many you want.
yeah.
And an EDH.
And if you look at that art, she's got a little puppy inside, like, hey, I'm here too.
Yeah,
First.
I noticed that. I like it.
Spoilers for Puppy Tribal?
Oh shit, jackals. 4?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go into my last spoiler for this episode. It is Combat Celebrant. It is 2 in a red for a 4/1 human warrior. If Combat Celebrant hasn't been exerted this turn, you may exert it as it attacks. When you do, untap all other creatures you control, and after this phase, there's an additional combat phase. This guy is going straight in my Maelstrom Wanderer deck, because with haste, he's crazy. He's more or less 3 mana for an extra combat step when he has haste. So I'm really, really excited to put him in Maelstrom Wanderer.
Extra combat steps can mean the end of a game for sure.
Totally.
Definitely.
Steven, what's your last spoiler?
I don't have one that I want to talk about, but I do have one.
Okay.
So for my last spoiler, and I guess we'll just touch on all the gods while we're here, but I'm going to touch on Oketra the True, the white god for this set. She's 3 and 1 white for 3/6, legendary creature god. She's got double strike, indestructible, just like the gods from the Theros set. She can't attack or block unless you've met a criteria, although I guess I shouldn't have likened her to those because they were enchantments. She can't attack or block unless you control 3 other creatures at least. She has an activated ability, it's 3 colorless and a white, and you can create a 1/1 white warrior creature token with Vigilance. So this is cool, but I'm kind of salty about this because I thought that she was going to have something to do with cats. She doesn't, and that makes me sad. Suppose it's only fair because the other gods in the set weren't like tribal focused, that she wasn't tribal focused, so she kind of fits with them. But since they had finally brought back cats into a main set, I was kind of excited and hoping that she would do something with those.
Cat
She didn't.
champion.
It broke my heart, and that's it. I quit Magic.
And that's it. The podcast is over.
Yeah, this is over. Bye, everyone.
Last episode. Roll that outro.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention, unless you had something to add to the god.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna say it's pretty disappointing, as she has the face of a cat, but does not help cats.
So you mentioned the god, the white one specifically, and I wanted to flow. Oh no, I didn't. No, I didn't. I didn't want to do that at all. We're gonna talk about the stories on the next one. Magic the Gathering
looks
stories on their website. Very interesting, well written, and we're gonna talk about it on the next episode about flavor.
It's time for the deck tech.
Ah! Deck tech. Yeah, this is deck tech. We're going to talk about a deck that one of us specifically built and has played with very frequently. This time it's Hunter, and he's talking about his Brago deck that will be up on Tapped Out in a deck list that we will have as a link in the description, and you can check it out yourself. But Hunter's just going to kind of lightly go over it, how he constructed it, some of his favorite cards in it, favorite interactions, and we'll talk about, before he begins, our experiences with this deck and playing against it. So, Steven, do you have maybe some stories about playing against Brago?
Playing against Brago is usually the kind of thing that, like, heavy medication or therapy helps you get over. Because it's never necessarily a good experience to be staring down the barrel of. Sure, a lot of it kind of hinges on Brago, unless you build it to not hinge on Brago. But the whole, like, bounce this and bring it back, and he can bounce so many things, guys. So many things. It's just horrible.
I like to call it the trampoline deck. Yeah, Brago isn't fully necessary. The deck is actually pretty solid, and he can get a lot of interactions going on without him. But if you see him coming out onto the field, you just pretty much you just concede there. No, not really.
He's one of those that whenever his ability activates, and there's a handful of cards like this, like, oh, so-and-so's ability is activating, that you know your turn isn't coming around for quite some time.
It's true. A lot of
There's a lot of
interactions,
math.
slows everything down. But it's interesting to watch. There's a lot going on, and usually it takes you by surprise. So, with that, we'll get on into the deck tech. Hunter?
Okay, Brago, King Eternal. I saw him spoiled and thought immediately wanted to build with him, but it was a few months before I actually built with him. And he costs 2, a white and a blue, for a 2/4 legendary spirit with flying. He reads, When Brago King Eternal does combat damage to a player, exile any number of target non-land permanents you control. Return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. He is broken, to say the least, when he can deal combat damage. But I have a lot of cards that let him get through, so I guess I'll start with those. As far as for protection for Brago, Lightning Greaves. I have Lightning Greaves in there to give him haste and Shroud. I have a lot of auras that give him Unblockable, Landwalk, Shroud. I'll go in specifics. I run Traveler's Cloak. It's 2 and a blue. As Traveler's Cloak comes into play, choose a land type. Enchanted creature has Landwalk of the chosen type. When Traveler's Cloak comes into play, draw a card. This one is great for Brago because it can make him unblockable and it draws you a card. And you can actually flicker it with Brago to draw more cards. So it kind of does double duty. It lets Brago get through and do damage and draws me cards every time Brago does damage. And another card similar to that is Unquestioned Authority, and it's an enchant creature for 2 and a white. When Unquestioned Authority comes into play, draw a card. Enchanted creature has protection from creatures. So that kind of pseudo makes him unblockable. So when they have protection from creatures, they can't be targeted to be blocked by a creature. So that really helps out. And draws cards. I also run Steel of the Godhead. It's 2 and a hybrid white-blue for an enchant creature aura. As long as enchanted creature is white, it gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. As long as enchanted creature is blue, it gets +1/+1 and is unblockable. I really just run it for the unblockable. Lifelink's cool and all, but
Lifelink's a nice touch, though.
yeah, it's a nice touch. It's definitely a nice secondary ability. But yeah, the unblockable mainly. And then my last aura I run is Diplomatic Immunity. It's 1 and a blue. Enchanted creature can't be the target of spells or abilities. Diplomatic Immunity can't be the target of spells or abilities. This could arguably be counterproductive since I run Traveler's Cloak and Unquestioned Authority, but it only costs 2 mana, so I can get it out earlier, and Brago gets killed a lot, so I play him a lot, so I will... Traveler's Cloak and Unquestioned Authority are never going to be dead, per se. I can hold him until the next time I have to play Brago, because he doesn't stick around too long, even with Shroud. I also run Spirit Mantle. It is 1 and a white aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has protection from creatures. Another protection from creatures effect. Now, I'm going to go into the cards that can be absolutely abused with Brago. Before I start into that, I would just like to say that Panharmonicon makes cards be even more abused with Brago. Panharmonicon is a 4-cost artifact. If an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So, whenever I flicker creatures or artifacts, I get double the ability. So, that is just unspeakably
evil.
Yes. With Brago, it is ridiculous. It's ridiculous in any EDH deck for the most part. For a deck that's built around enter the battlefield effects, you get so much value. So the cards that are just kind of outright abusive with Brago, Mystic Remora is the first one I'd like to talk about. It's 1 blue enchantment with a cumulative upkeep of 1 colorless. At every upkeep, you put an age counter on the permanent that has cumulative upkeep, and then pay the cost of the cumulative upkeep forever how many age counters are on it. And with Brago, whenever you can bounce it, the age counters restart. So with Mystic Remora, as long as I can consistently bounce it every turn, its cumulative upkeep cost is only going to be 1 always. And it reads, whenever target opponent successfully casts a non-creature spell, you may draw a card. That player may pay 4 to counter this effect. That's a lot to pay. And people are going to be playing a lot of non-creature spells in EDH. So that is a bunch of card draw that you don't have to deal with the cumulative upkeep cost of.
It definitely keeps them on their toes, spending all that extra mana they would have saved for like a counter.
Oh yeah, and some people are not going to want you to have that extra card, especially if you've drawn 2 or 3 that turn. The 4 mana is nice to keep people from having that extra. Another card, this card I really don't use that often unless I'm like trying to end the game, because it's just mean. And it's one of those cards that will make people rage unless you use it in the right situation. Reality Acid. 2 and a blue It's an aura enchant permanent. It has Vanishing 3, which really isn't important for this deck. It says when Reality Acid leaves play, enchanted permanent's controller sacrifices it. You basically make someone sacrifice a permanent every turn with Brago, and it is disgusting. You hit their
Never let go of a
lands.
friend as quickly as you have whenever he is playing Brago and slaps this on one of your lands.
Yeah.
You look across the table at him and just go, let you go. In my heart, I would like you to leave now.
Yeah, especially if it's early game, like turn 3 or 4. It's not a cool card to play early. And I'll reserve it as a win condition when I really need a win conditioner. Let's see some more fun cards to abuse a Brago. I'll talk about some mana rocks that normally have a downside, but with Brago don't. Basalt Monolith and Mana Vault. Both of them add 3 colorless mana to your mana pool, but they don't untap, and you have to pay mana to untap them. With Brago, you don't have to pay mana. You just bounce them, they come in untapped, you get to use them. Great mana rocks for Brago. And then obviously any mana rock is good. Soul Ring, Azorius Signet, they're all going to come in untapped. So
What's that one from the Time Spiral set? Coalition Relic.
oh yeah, I don't have that one in here.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it is.
Not a cheap card, apparently.
No, it's not. I have one, and it's in like a 3-color deck, I think.
Read us that
They
description.
reprinted it in the Coalition versus Phyrexia dual
Yeah,
decks.
that's where I got it from.
And for some reason, like, a bunch of people that I used to trade with got those, and then were like, oh, I don't want this deck, even though it had some really good stuff in it. So I ended up with quite a few just from that one set. That and the Demonic Tutor from the Demonic versus Angelic. A bunch
Yes.
of those.
I love that art.
I never knew who that guy was until they brought him in the comics.
Oh yeah, the demon.
Yeah.
Cathafed, isn't it?
Kothafed,
Yeah.
something like that. It's Vizier.
Yes. The visor.
Yeah,
Vizier.
the Visor.
Yeah. Anyway, another card that's really fun with Brago is Spawn of Ishsa. 7-cost artifact. When Spawn of Ishsa enters the battlefield, destroy target permanent. Great card
Destroy
for
target
Brago.
friendship.
Yeah, basically.
Everyone should know that card from
Yeah.
having a salty time with it.
It's a great card. Another card I have really a whole lot of fun with in Brago is Altar of the Brood. For only 1 colorless mana, you get an artifact that reads, whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. When you bounce about 10 different permanents, the whole board mills 10.
And that's not 10 permanents the whole game, guys. This deck can routinely do that per turn.
And I also have like different bounce cards to bounce other things without needing Brago. Every turn, people mill a lot of cards off of Altar the Brood. Another kind of secondary win con, too. A new card that I just put in is Teferi Temporal Archmage. And really, the
yeah.
only reason he is in there is for his -1 ability of untap up to 4 target permanents. I get to use all my mana rocks, tap them, play Teferi, untap them, use them again, swing with Brago, untap them, get a new instance of Teferi, tap them, play a spell, untap them again with Teferi, and then use them again. It's ridiculous.
It's a lot of mana.
You could also...
Usually
I
at
don't-
this point in the game, people will start going, you know what, let's just go to the next game.
Yeah. I don't do this, but especially running Teferi, some people like to run a super heavy lockdown build with Brago, where no one's permanent's untapped, and people only get to untap 1 permanent, like with Stasis and was it Winter Orb? I don't do that because I still want the deck to be fun for other people too. See, another great card. I'll just go over my Planeswalkers. I run 4. I run Teferi Temporal Archmage, Tameo the Moon Sage, Venser the Sojourner, and Tezzeret the Seeker. The best of those is probably Tezzeret the Seeker, because you can search out 2 artifacts a turn and put them onto the battlefield. You can neg him for 0 and get the artifact lands and put them into play. That's something I really like doing. If I've already gotten most of my others. I heard a knock.
Harlow, cut this.
Don't cut it, Harlow.
I think it's Jehovah's Witness.
Hunter City Commander.
Yes.
Whoa. We'll have an episode
Hunter.
where it's just you called Hunter City Commander.
Just can we get 3 different tracks of Hunter?
We're gonna
Can we do
that.
it to where like it's all 3 of us recording, but then Hunter takes the tracks of me and Harlow and then re-records them himself?
Oh my god.
We're doing that. We're gonna do that. That's gonna be awesome. Hunter thinks I'm joking. We're doing this.
Okay, I'll get back to the deck tech. I'm going to go through a few specialty lands I run. Hall of the Bandit Lord gives Brago haste, which can be super important because having to let him go once around the table and survive is very risky and not likely. So Hall of the Bandit Lord helps give him haste, help me get some value out of him. There's a really interesting land that I found in a collection someone gave me called Ice Flow, and it says you may choose not to untap Ice Flow during your untap phase. Now you tap it to tap target creature without flying that is attacking you. As long as Ice Flow remains tapped, that creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap phase. I thought it was interesting.
So does that ability stack? Like if you were to untap it but then tap another one at their untap step, if you've targeted 2 with that land, would they both not untap?
I would imagine not, because I feel like once it's untapped, it kind of ends that effect for that creature it was targeting.
Yeah.
And then once it's tapped again, it's like a new instance of the card.
Still, that'd be an interesting thing to look up and know for sure. And if any of our listeners know and you want to write in to Undercity Commander, go right ahead. Direct your angry letters care of Under.
Yes, do
Hunter.
that.
Write them to him. Don't write them to me.
Undercity Commander knows nothing at gmail.com.
Whoop, whoop.
One interesting thing to note is that it does not remove the creature from combat. So it's still attacking you, but it could make people think twice unless they have a way to get rid of Ice Flow. Here's the official answer, Steven. If Ice Flow untaps or leaves the battlefield, its effect will end. This has no immediate visible effect on the creature. It doesn't untap immediately, for example. The creature will just untap as normal during its controller's next untap step. So no, you can't cheat it by untapping it and tapping it and targeting another creature and having them both not untapped. And then the last land I wanted to highlight is Mistveil Plains. It's one of those Shadowmoor cards that comes in tapped and it has an activated ability. Tap a white and it. Put target card in your graveyard on the bottom of your library. Play this ability only if you control 2 or more white permanents. This is effective with the tutor cards like Tezzeret and any other tutors, because if I tutor for something and someone destroyed it, I can put it right back on the bottom and go get it again with one of my other tutors.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
I would like to talk about a few cards that I recently just added. I haven't really gotten to play with them, but I'm excited to see how they work out. They're all instants. One of them is Aether Mage's Touch. For 2, a white and a blue, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a creature card from among them into play with, at the end of your turn, return this creature to its owner's hand. Then put the rest of the cards revealed this way on the bottom of your library in any order.
Ugh.
Yeah, I like that because if I do it on my turn, I get an enter the battlefield trigger. Then it's going to come back to my hand, and I'll be able to get another enter the battlefield trigger. And if I haven't swung with Brago yet on that turn, so I'll get an enter the battlefield trigger, another enter the battlefield trigger with Brago, and then it'll return to my hand at the end step, and I'll get to do it again. I'm really thinking that'll be a good card, and I like that it's an instant because I can tap out attacking and maybe not worry about someone attacking me because there does have to be a creature in the top 4, but I have a lot of scry, so I'm thinking it could be a really good include. And then the last 2 I wanted to talk about is that I just added.
Another cool, like, just latent ability of Brago is that whenever he brings this stuff in, of course he untaps them, which works with, like, the mana rocks and everything, like you said, but he untaps the creatures, and so it leaves you with, like, defenses if you need.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that. Let's see. Of the other 2, I actually added 2 counter spells, and I usually, as a rule to myself, wouldn't run any counter spells in blue because I feel like it makes the game really unfun when you just can't play Magic. But I decided to add 2. I think as long as you're not running an insane amount of counter spells and just countering everything everyone does, then it's not a problem. I think 2 will be good.
Hold myself to these rules so that it's fun for everybody, but when I start losing, I'm okay with breaking those rules.
Well, basically. Overwhelming Denial is 2 and 2 blue. Overwhelming Denial can't be countered by spells or abilities. Counter target spell. And it also has a surge cost of 2 blue. And surge is, you may cast a spell for its surge cost if you or a teammate has cast another spell this turn. So you can potentially get it really cheap if someone's trying to stop you from doing something. So you've already played a spell at that point. They try to counter it or stop it somehow. You get a cheap way to make sure that doesn't happen because Overwhelming Denial can't be countered. And I really like the absoluteness of that.
Hey, please stop bouncing all your creatures. No.
Yes. And then the last counter spell is, I think, a hidden gem among counterspells. Foil, 2 and 2 blue. You may discard an island card and another card rather than pay foil's mana cost. Counter target spell. So you can pay 4 and counter a spell, or you can tap out and discard an island and another card and play it for free. It's a free counter spell. I don't understand why it doesn't see more play. And really, discarding 2 cards in Commander isn't that big a deal most of the time because they're crazy card draw spells. There's cards like Howling Minds, so sometimes people help everyone draw cards. It's like a poor man's Force of Will.
And it stops people, or it tricks people from just looking at your untapped mana, because a lot of the times if you're playing a blue deck, you're looking for those 2 untapped islands, and that kind of sets you off from playing stuff. But if you're fully tapped out, you could still play this counter spell and trip somebody up.
Oh yeah, every time I see a blue player
tapped
tapped
their
out,
move and tap yourself out.
yeah, every time I see a blue player tapped out on mana, I'm just like, oh, it's time to go to town. I'm going to play everything I can possibly play right now. Lastly, I'll go over some of the highlight creatures. The deck is, I don't want to say mostly creatures, but it has a lot of creatures with really good enter the battlefield effects.
Would you say
First,
it's mostly permanents?
Oh, definitely mostly permanents. I only have 2 sorceries and non-instants, and most of those permanents are creatures. But the first card I'd like to go over, earlier I mentioned that I like to include at least 1 political card in my decks now. And the political card for Braco is Custody Squire, 4 and a white for a 3/3 with flying. It's a spirit cleric. It has Will of the Council. When Custody Squire enters the battlefield, starting with you, each player votes for an artifact, creature, or enchantment card in your graveyard. Return each card with the most votes or tied for the most votes to your hand. I replaced a card that straight up recurred an artifact with this card because it can possibly get me more than just an artifact. But also, it gets people involved in the game. Makes everyone can choose to put a useless card in my hand or something that's not going to help me too much. Or if I have a deal going with a few people and there's someone that's obviously on top, the rest of the board can help me get back something that can take that player off the top. So it's a really cool political card I'm excited to play with. Another one is Great Whale. I was running Peregrine Drake, but Great Whale reads, when Great Whale comes into play, untap up to 7 lands. I like how many more he untapped, and I don't have a Palinchron, so I feel like Great Whale is a budget, fair way of doing it, because he does cost 7 mana. Stonehorn Dignitary can lock someone out of combat for the rest of the game. When Stonehorn Dignitary enters the battlefield, target opponent skips his or her next combat phase. Another card is Limbala the Preserver. She's 4 and 2 white for a 5/5 with flying. Whenever she enters the battlefield, if an opponent has more life than you, you gain 5 life. Whenever she enters the battlefield, if an opponent has more creatures than you, you get a 3/3 white angel creature token with flying. I really doubted her power in EDH when she first came out, but since I've been playing with her, she's crazy good. She benefits me every time I play her. You don't think that 5 life counts for much, or that a 1/3/3 is going to count for too much, but it helps a lot when you're behind.
And you had a little other lifelink here and there throughout the deck, so it's kind of like a sub strategy, not really leading to a win, but it just keeps you from dipping too low on life.
Speaking of dipping too low on life, Jacob, I also run Resolute
Death Cloud.
Archangel. No, not Death Cloud. I run Resolute Archangel. She's 5 and 2 white for a 4/4 flying, and when she enters the battlefield, if your life total is less than your starting life total, it becomes equal to your starting life total.
That doesn't count as life gain, though. You're setting your life total to a number, so...
It does.
It counts as life gain, though.
Oh, it counts as life gain. That's insane.
Anything that sets
I
your
thought
life
it
total,
did.
like Soren is life loss.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
It's just worded really weird.
Yeah. But I use Resolute
all of it.
Archangel to reset my life total every turn if I need to. It's great. So people have to swing 40 at you to beat you. It works. Or commander damage. And then I'll go with the last creature I wanted to talk about is Nevermaker. For 3 and a blue, it's a 2/3 with flying. And whenever Nevermaker leaves play, put target non-land permanent on top of its owner's library. This can be very unfair. If you can do it several times, you'll just lock someone out of the game. They won't draw new cards. They'll be playing the same stuff that they had on the board already. It's also one of those I don't really play unless I really need to. Any thoughts, anyone?
Those all sound really cool. You worked really hard on that deck.
Yeah, you've put a lot of time into the deck. It has had multiple iterations, and each one's been better than the last. It's an interesting deck to play against, and it's a really fun deck to play with.
If you'd like to see the complete deck list, it will be on our Tapped Out.
Undercity.com/commander tapped out hashtag Patreon
Our Tapped Out's not up
/
So if you like the deck, you can find the full deck list on Tapped Out. Our username is Undercity_Commander. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/UndercityMTG, Twitter at twitter.com/UC Commander, SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Undercity-Commander, and you can email us at undercitycommander@gmail.com. We want to hear from you.
That's right, and if you're the person on Tapped Out who already had the Undercity Commander name, don't worry, we'll find you.
Yes.
And I wanted to mention we have a Chrome theme that was recently created with some of Steven's art. And if you use Google Chrome and you want to make it look fancy, we'll have the link for that in the description.
And on our social media. Thanks for listening, guys. Until next week.
Computers.
Personal computers.
Computing. All the
Computing.
computers. Stop all the downloading.
See you next
Somebody
week.
fax it to me.
Bye.